At first, I freaked out. For obvious reasons. I'm a woman, and even if I weren't, the sensation of being followed is never good. It started when I was a teenager and coming home from school. At first, I assumed it was just some classmate that had the same route as me. Every time I turned a corner, the shadow would follow. However, every time I stopped, they would stop too. I didn't want to pay attention too much, because I thought it was a stalker or something, but I started getting so freaked out that I'd periodically stop and look back. And no one was there. Even when there was no possible place where they could have hidden. I told my family and friends, and even if I was walking along with them, I'd still feel followed, and that went on for years and years. Obviously, after I moved out to a city 1,000 miles away, I realized it had to be all in my head. I felt followed even in my own house all the time. One night, I had the brilliant idea to open my front camera and check behind me. That's when I first saw the creature, and it wasn't pretty. I remember that moment vividly, but after that everything was a blur. I just know therapists and priests couldn't help me, and I had to accept this permanent guest in my life. Besides, it's not like it did anything. Just watched. Last month, I had to wake up really early for a flight, but even though I was incredibly tired, I could still make out something was wrong. I don't know how. The air felt different. I got on the plane, and the whole trip, the watching sensation had stopped. It was almost imperceptible, but I knew, just like one of your ears is clogged because your balance is a little off. I thought the creature hadn't managed to get on the plane with me, but even when I returned back home, the guest would not make an appearance anymore. I stopped hearing its footsteps and seeing it with my front camera. I stopped feeling watched for the first time in 15 years. Now, some would have been relieved. Happy, even. I wasn't. You know how silence doesn't always have to be comforting? I kept associating this with the calm before the storm. Let me describe it to you. You're walking through a dense forest, loud and full of life. What do you do when the noise stops? When suddenly everything is dead silent? Do you feel relief? I didn't. Well, the watching sensation started again 3 days ago, only this time it was more prominent than ever. I didn't necessarily feel relieved, just back to my normal state of ignoring whatever thing had chosen me as its show. I didn't think it would hurt me. It had done this for over 15 years. Why start now? I should have moved on from these thoughts, and yet. Well, as I said, the sensation was more prominent. And so were the footsteps I'd hear behind me and the breathing. I was watching this show on my laptop, and it had a dark scene, the ones where you can see your own reflection in the screen. I stared at my face and at the pale silhouette of my dresser behind me, waiting for the frame to get lit up again so I could finally make out what was happening. I spun around a bit in my chair. At my desk, in the living room that had no dresser, I paused the show and stared at the white silhouette, then took out my front camera, trying to look behind me. The creature wasn't there anymore. At least, not all of it. Just the skin. Stretched out, the face propped, eyes wide open, like some coat too tight to fit a much larger body. As if something was wearing its skin, with bloodshot eyes, never blinking, fixated on the camera. It had seen I was looking at it, so it looked back, then smiled. My instinct was to take a picture, so I did, but it just showed me and nothing behind. I turned around, only to be greeted by the empty room. Something was wrong. I had forgotten to breathe, and my limbs were numb from fear. Trembling, I stood up and ran, tripping and hitting my knee on the coffee table. I ran like crazy upstairs, to my bedroom, and slammed the door shut. For the last 3 days, I've only walked around the house with my back against a wall, never leaving any space for anyone, or anything, to follow me anywhere. Because, if I know one thing, it's that it always stays behind me. Problem is, I can't keep up with this lifestyle forever, and I think it's waiting for me to turn my back on it. I've been watched and followed for 15 years, and yet, I have never been so terrified until now.